Okay. Hello. Welcome to the realm of ideas is free to all. This is the preview for
Hello.
episode 82. IP.
Hello.
This is the preview for episode 82, the concern for criticism. This follows up, well, I mean, everything follows on other stuff.
Thank you, Pete.
But this one follows up directly on the loss of criticism. Now, what we were saying was not about necessarily the loss of criticism, but the attack on criticism and the fear of what exactly the world would look like if we lost criticism. Now, again, we've talked about the idea of a post-truth world and a place where kind of consequence no longer matters. But I think in this case, we identified that system of criticism. So the first thing we were going to talk about was a little bit about that idea of what does it look like with a loss of criticism. This is more of a continuation, but the focus is now on the concern for criticism, why it's important, why it's here, and what it means if it kind of seeks to be kind of like under attack. Mm-hmm. So my name is Bruce Gemmell. I'm a draftsman, a researcher, and by draftsman, let me explain that. I'm a draftsman in the sense of like Leonardo da Vinci in the fact that everything from the drawing and illustration of people to things to objects to get to the nature of their understanding, as Whitehead kind of affectionately refers to in the Century of Genius, that naturalist desire to understand things. So I see myself as trying to follow in that tradition, trying to take those things as myself, as well as a researcher. Julie, on the other hand, is a brilliant writer and a brilliant painter.
Thank you.
Yes, and here is our international correspondent, Pengel, who is basically, again, off on assignment, and we may not see for a few weeks, but we'll see. Anyway, she's off. She's off to Central Asia to try to find some kind of like lost remnants and things like that, and things of that nature.
She's a bird of few words.
She is. Oh, that's funny. But she's our international correspondent. Actually, I think she's up for a Pulitzer Prize this year. But we'll see. Honestly, she certainly deserves it, given the state of journalism today. That is funny. Yeah. All right, so let me.
Sorry, that's hilarious. Okay.
Okay.
Do you want to say, or can I just do a quick intro, or do you want?
Go, Pete. Okay. Go, Pussycat. Go.
Thanks. That's just so funny. Sorry.
I can see it. Honestly, I can see that happening.
Okay. I kind of have to compose myself. That's so funny. We have so much fun here at Art Science Complex.
We do.
First of all,
it's almost like there's a whole bunch of us.
Yes, I would like to say hello to all of our new friends and subscribers from the Center for Architecture, a wonderful place, and we have people who are very, very enthusiastic there in the New York City chapter, the AIANY. A shout out to all of our friends there. And I will be talking about on Saturday, as my colleague Bruce just said, this is a preview of our full 1 hour podcast on our Art Science Complex YouTube channel on Saturday. I will be discussing what I call the strategic critic or the visionary critic. Number one, I hold my colleague Bruce as an excellent visionary and strategic critic. And what I mean is that...
Is that where our frontispiece comes from?
Yes. As one who builds, is a progressive thinker, who creates with the mind to future projects and also future of criticism. I mean, how these projects fit into the greater lexicon, whether it is classical music, architecture, painting, drawing, the sciences. And I will be talking about Arthur Dyson, who is, and he's still around, he's like 81, and he is one of my favorite organic architects. And Arthur Dyson, for those of you who don't know, was one of the final apprentice architects to Frank Lloyd Wright the year before he died, and would have still been there, and actually lived in a Wright building for several years when he apprenticed with Bruce Goff, one of my other favorite architects. And if anybody wants to see some visionary work by critics, and when I say the innate critic or the strategic critic, it is criticism by example, and this is vastly different from someone who stands on a soapbox or podium, points a finger, and simply, wants to crush other people down or malign people. It is the idea of taking the higher road, of criticism by creative example. And Bruce is a perfect example. Number one, Arthur Dyson, Bruce Goff, and Frank Lloyd Wright. And I will just say the polar opposite, and someone I will be talking about, who is what I call the unreliable critic.
This is like the unreliable.
Yes,
I like that.
John Ruskin. So
I figured that's how Ruskin would work. When you said Ruskin,
sorry, I don't want to overtake. Please.
When you said Ruskin, I was like, ew.
Yeah, ew.
Yeah,
right.
Like,
no,
ew.
It's a big ew. Sorry.
All right, good. Yeah, I was like thinking, like, what have you done with Julie?
Yes.
Anyway,
yes.
So anyway, one of the things I think that is something we talked about last week was the idea of the unbreakable bond. And actually, let me say something before we go too far. Oh, yes. Thank you, Tees T, our favorite sponsor, best sponsor in the world. Yep. So what was interesting was I noticed that our program seemed to be very polarizing.
Oh, it did.
And it seems as if we had a slew of people basically decide we were no longer worthy of listening to. Now, I want to say I used some inappropriate language, but again, I will talk about that later. But I will apologize for my language if it was offensive. I will not, however, apologize for the content, because I felt that the content that we discussed
was very
incredibly solid
yeah.
and incredibly important and meaningful.
Never apologize for important ideas.
Exactly. So
Absolutely.
I think one of the things that's interesting is that, one of the things that happens is language is an indicator of vitality. I believe that just the same way that sarcasm is an indicator of vitality, so is language. And I think the fact that we see so little vitality is telling, because I think it's used as an excuse to basically attack things of consequence, in this case, criticism. So I believe that you can have bad work and you can have evil intent. So you can say something that basically may not be an appropriate term, but then you can have solely evil intent. And I will differentiate between the intent and information, as in the case of skepticism, in terms of criticism. But the idea is there are many people who want to make sure they use proper language, but their intentions and their desires are just absolutely diabolical. So I want to make sure that's clear. So again, if anyone was offended by my language and they chose to leave as a result, I totally apologize. And that really is something I will apologize for. But I feel as if the content that we were talking about, especially if there was something that someone was offended by the content, I have no apologies for
Never apologize.
So anyway,
we don't apologize for our content.
One of the things, if we get something wrong, we'll say, hey, we found out that was really not, that we were incorrect. But the point is, we were actually, this is probably one of the things I think is probably one of the core ideas of what we do. So anyway, reading from my favorite book, maybe.
You can see that.
I think The Origin of Species is my favorite book, but this is definitely one of my top 5. Anyway, so book 1, The Understanding, part 4, and this is section 1, right, of the skeptical and other systems of philosophy. Now, this is basically one of the reasons I want to make sure that we understand, at least my poor understanding of the project, what I call the project of skepticism.
I think you have a very solid understanding.
There is no algebraist nor mathematician so expert in his science as to place entire confidence in any truth immediately upon his discovery of it, or regard it as anything but a mere probability. Every time he runs over his proof, his confidence increases, but still more by the approbation of his friends, and is raised to its utmost perfection by the universal assent of applause of the learned world. Now, 'tis evident that this gradual increase of assurance is nothing but the addition of new probabilities, right? And it's derived from the constant union of causes and effects according to past experiences and observation. Now, Hume's first two chapters about this, about skepticism in the case of reason and skepticism in the case of senses, talk about a very controversial, problematic, and really probably intricate and beautiful aspect. I think it is probably the key, most important project that Hume engaged in. And what it is the fact that there are the belief that there are things that we would call, say, the body or the natural world, and that we kind of have to take these things to a degree for granted. And at the same time, as we study this and we start to understand the frailty of our own imaginations and our own minds, we start to understand that our ability to comprehend this becomes something of concern. However, we don't have something to substitute that is of more consequence.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of where we are. Because if I go back to what I said, we talked about the idea of unbreakable bonds. We talked about the idea of using to understand those things as a kind of generator of an indicator of societal health. We talked about the idea of the relationship of the unbreakable bond between technique and reason, or science.
Science. Thanks, I'm having
Right.
major allergies.
So in this case, the idea is there is an idea of coherence that exists in terms of the fact that we can have some kind of sense of pattern recognition. With that said, the reason why we have to have concern for criticism is the fact that it underlies an important aspect. Criticism is one of those things that gives light and gives rise to the way in which we engage in that relationship between technique and reason. Okay. So if one is being assailed, it's for the other thing. And the ultimate the question would be, is there a situation where, in case we might be having a need to upgrade this, just as we see, just the same as technique has been wedded with other things prior to reason, and that by wedding it with reason, we were able to elevate it to a kind of more succinct and more venerable kind of renderer of consequence. We now realize if we are to basically assail criticism, the reason is it because of a positive thing, or is it because an unhealthy society is basically trying to assail something of consequence? That's long-winded. That's all I have to say, but that's basically where we are. I feel very passionate about this.
Oh no, I do too. That's beautifully said.
Ruskin,
Quite
yeah.
eloquent.
Yeah.
Well, there's a reason. Let me say this. So just like in the murder mystery, we have the unreliable narrator, which is a skewed point of view with a cloaked agenda that is so cloaked that the reader doesn't realize they're being led down a vicious garden path full of briars and thorny and poisonous plants. Now, we have a lot of critics now who basically I am now terming the unreliable critic. And this is a term that I would love to see catch on big time. And I bring up a reprehensible character, John Ruskin. He was a writer. He lived from I need to say this. He lived from 1819, way too long, because he did a lot of damage until 1900. I will call it counterfeit criticism by psychologically flawed or distorted sources. So it's okay. When ostensibly objective professional academic criticism is in reality entirely governed by the critic's own compromised emotional or psychological biases and personal ghosts and bizarre belief structures. And I will be getting into, he's a great model for a venal, vile, vengeful, and vindictive character who had a pathological phobia of adult women, made his wife's life a living hell
Every
till
man
she
has that.
annulled it. No, Puddle, I have to say this. It was incredibly, and I'm going to save the fun grotesqueries for a Saturday, because this is jaw-dropping stuff and it's all true, until she had the good sense and the power to have this sham of a marriage annulled. His penchant for prepubescent girls. Oh, no, it's a pretty bad. And his religious zealotry, which meant every word of his criticism was sieved through a colander of rampant misogyny, a plethora of bizarre phobias that he held his entire life, never changed. They only got worse and more severe. And he had a very strict evangelical Christian upbringing, which, I mean, one can flourish, one can be open-minded, one does not have to be close-minded just because one is religious. Look at Kitty Ferguson. I mean, you can be a scientist and, still have a belief structure in a God. It's not, but in the case of Ruskin, he was an unreliable critic because he had bias about everything.
Okay. I love this idea,
Oh,
because the
great,
thing is,
great.
since
Yeah.
I've talked in the
Great.
past about the ability to separate intent and information, and the idea of observation and skepticism. One of the great values of skepticism we spoke briefly about last week is the fact that regardless of intent, it's the responsibility of the artist, and I separate between the critic and the artist, to be able to parse out the information and determine its consequence. So just as the unreliable narrator is often an interesting complexity that's added to a story
It's
in order to
fascinating.
in order to get out of truth, and realize the unreliable critic is just as fascinating in the fact that it could. No, I like it, because the idea is, I'll say this, all critics are unreliable in their definition. So that the idea of the critic is unreliable in itself, in the fact that regardless of if its biases are conscious, unconscious, or otherwise, intent is irrelevant, but is a fascinating overlay. Because what happens is the value of skepticism means you don't concern yourself with intent. You concern yourself with consequence. Okay.
That's well
Thank you,
said.
Pete.
I'm going to make a quick analogy to the classical stage. You're going to love this.
Perfect.
In the time before the green screen and CGI, you had the gel. You had classic gels in a kaleidoscope, kind of like a rotoscope, and not the same thing, but the same idea is that you could mechanically, in a manual way, change the look of a scene quite dramatically by hand, by your will, rather quickly.
It actually comes up because also in section 2, right, which is skepticism and its relation to the senses.
Not section 8.
That's funny. Hume talks about the vulgar in terms of the idea of the perception of the body. And again,
that's all about what.
Yes, it actually is interesting, because I think there's a lot of parallels here. Anyway, let's not get to. We're already at 20 minutes, Pete.
I'll just quickly finish my classic British stage analogy is the gel, meaning you could take a picnic on a wildflowered hill in the middle of the sun, suddenly turn the wheel and cast a gel and it's a dark and stormy night, meaning in a moment, the entire temperament, the entire substance of a scene appears to have changed. It is the same scene recast, and it's a very manipulative process, as is the unreliable critic.
So is the vulgar appearance as relates to the idea of the perception of the body and the impression, and it not being separated. In the case of the vulgar, there's no separation from the impression that is given and the body itself. All right, so the realm of ideas is free to all, and it's the benefit of all for us to keep it and remain just that way.
Precisely.
Stay free.